Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, on a Cardfight Vanguard episode, we're going to be talking about Answer of Truth, the new set that comes out January 18th, 2019. This set comes with 3 clans, Great Nature, Genesis, and Gear Chronicle, so we're going to talk about each of those so you can see what kind of cards you want to look out for. The interesting thing about this set is that it does have 2 Force clans instead of having a Protect clan. So there's an Axel and 2 Force, so that's kind of interesting. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, a little disclaimer for all of you seasoned Vanguard fighters out there. We are specifically going to be talking about Standard, not Premium. Meaning I'm only going to be talking about the clans as they will appear in this set with those cards. So let's get started talking about them. The first clan we're going to talk about is Great Nature. That is the Axel clan of the set, and it seems pretty fun, so let's go over them real quick. The VR for Great Nature is School Hunter Leopold. It is a grade 3, and its effects are continuous on Van. If you have a grade 3 in your soul, this unit's auto abilities activate 2 times, and its auto on Van. When placed, put the top card of your deck into the drop zone and perform one of the effects below depending upon that card's type. If it's a normal unit, look at 4 cards from the top of your deck and call up to 2 grade 2 or less cards from among them to the rearguard circles, and shuffle your deck. If it's a trigger unit, this unit gets plus 15k and 1 crit until the end of turn. So that's a pretty good card when you look at the aspect of it has the re-ride potential. If the grade 3 is in soul, then you can do the milling effect twice. So because of that, the re-ride for this is really good. Next up, we have another grade 3, which is Pencil Hero Hamsuke. And that effect reads, auto on Vanguard. When placed, if you have Pencil Knight Hamsuke and Pencil Squire Hamsuke in soul, cost, discard 2 cards in hand, and get 1 Axel marker. Then, search your deck for a Pencil Knight Hamsuke and a Pencil Squire Hamsuke, and call them to rear and shuffle your deck. This one's an interesting card in that it's very situational, having specifically the Pencil Knight and the Pencil Squire in soul in order to get that effect off. But if you do get that effect off, then you do get an extra Axel marker. So because of that, it's not bad. I just feel like it's much more situational. Next, we have Armed Instructor Bison, and that effect reads, auto on Van or rear. When this unit attacks, cost Counterblast 1, and one of your rear guards gets plus 5k until the end of the turn. If this unit is on your Vanguard, stand that rear guard. So that's got some pretty good standing potential and some decent power, but it does cost a Counterblast, so depends on what you want to do with that. Next, we have Heavy Brain Myrmidon, which is the last grade 3, and this one does not give you an Axel marker. But its effect reads, act on Vanguard, cost Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1 grade 3 until the end of the turn, and all of your front row gets plus 10k and your opponent cannot intercept. The intercept potential is decent. Your opponent can't guard with that, but a lot of people just guard from cards in hand, so I don't think that it's very useful. As well as there's the aspect of this effect is only on Vanguard, and this card doesn't give you an Axel marker, so I don't know if you're really going to want to ride that card per se. As well as re-ride, considering its cost requires you to Soul Blast a grade 3. So it doesn't really have much re-ride potential. I'd probably write this card off. But now we move on to the grade 2s. First is Binoculus Tiger. Auto on Van or rear. When it attacks a Vanguard, cost Counterblast 1 and put the top card of your deck into your drop zone and perform one of the effects below based upon that card's type. If it's a normal unit, you draw a card. If it's a trigger unit, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it, and 3 of the units in your front row gain plus 5k until the end of the turn. So it's kind of got a similar effect in Leopold in that you mill the top card and get effects based on whatever card type it is. Obviously, you kind of want to go for a trigger unit because that trigger effect is a little bit better than draw a card, but that's a little bit more situational still. Next, there is Pencil Knight Hamsuke. which is a continuous on rear. If your Vanguard is Pencil Hero Hamsuke, this unit gets plus 3k. And continuous on Van, during the battle this unit attacked, if you have Pencil Squire Hamsuke in your soul, this unit gets plus 5k. So this is going back to Pencil Hero Hamsuke, being able to get the Pencil Knight and the Pencil Squire onto your rearguard circles. It kind of has a little bit of a boost if you do have Pencil Hero as your Vanguard, but we'll get to Pencil Squire here in a second, and we'll talk about that effect. The last grade 2 that we're going to talk about is Geograph Giant, and that's effect reads continuous on rear. If this unit is on an additional rearguard circle, this unit gets plus 8k. So that's not bad. It gets an extra power boost if it's not the only rearguard out there. So it's a decent beater. Now one of the grade 1s, we have Monoculus Tiger, which is similar to Leopold and Binoculus Tiger. Auto on Van or rear, when this unit attacks or boosts, costs Soul Blast 1, put the top card of your deck into your drop zone, and perform one of the effects below depending upon the card's type. If it's a normal unit, your opponent cannot call Sentinels from their hand until the end of that battle. If it's a trigger unit, your opponent can only call trigger units from their hand until the end of that battle. Again, going back to Binoculus Tiger and Leopold, that milling effect, but these are some pretty decent effects. Not being able to call Sentinels, I mean, that's just always pretty good. Being able to block any sort of perfect guard to try and get some higher damage. And then the opponent only calling trigger units. That one is a little bit different. That's more situational. If they have trigger units in their hand, then they can still guard because trigger units still have a decent shield on them. So I feel like it's not as good as the first one. And then we have our Pencil Squire Hamsuke. Its effect, auto on rear. If your Vanguard is Pencil Hero Hamsuke, this unit gets plus 4k. And auto on rear, at the end of the turn, costs Soul Blast 1 and put this unit into Soul. Search your deck for a Pencil Knight Hamsuke, reveal it, and put it in your hand and shuffle the deck. So again, you see that Pencil Squire gains some effects if your Vanguard is Pencil Hero. So that kind of effect of having your pencil lineup, they kind of bounce back off of each other, but like I said, it's a little bit situational in that you do have to have Squire and Knight in your soul. So because of that, that's a little bit situational. But in the aspect of how their effects work, the Squire can put itself into soul and pulls the Knight. The Knight can gain effects based on if it has Squire and Soul, and then the Hero gains effect based on if it has both in Soul. And then both the Pencil Squire and the Pencil Knight have rearguard effects if Hero is your Vanguard. So because of that, they work off of each other decently well in the aspect that it is a sort of little engine that can get off of each other and work in a sense, but it is only the 3 cards, so it doesn't exactly work to its fullest potential. Another thing to keep into consideration is that Geograph Giant, which allows this unit to get 8k if it is an additional rear, can actually be a 27k if it's on an Axel circle, which is a pretty decent poke for a rear guard. Granted, if it's on an Axel circle, it won't have any sort of boost, which you might be able to get some of that boost off if it was on a regular rear guard to still hit that high numbers, but it's a pretty decent poke. Overall, I think the deck is very cost heavy. Many cards need Counterblast or Soul Blast to get effects off, with not really any cards to regain all of those blasts. And there's no real charges for counter or soul. Then the duality of the Hamsuke line and the Tiger Leopold line don't really work very well together. I mean, as I mentioned, the pencil line, the Pencil Hero, Knight, and Squire, they work well together, but they don't really work well with the rest of the deck. Whereas the Tiger Leopold line, it kind of works well with the deck in the aspect of it doesn't really require anything else to help get the effects off. It's just that milling effect to get off. So because of that, the deck doesn't have as much consistency as I could see it having, but it definitely does seem to have more of an air of fun about it in the let's see what we can get off, the pencil line, or if we can sit here and get some of the mill effects. So because of that, It's not a bad deck. I definitely think that it would be something to take a look into. The next clan we're going to look into is Genesis, the first Force clan of Answer of Truth. Let's talk about some of the cards. The VR is Oracle Queen Himiko, and its effect reads, act on Van. Once per turn, you can Soul Blast 5. Put a critical or draw trigger into your soul on the bottom of the deck, and that trigger effect activates once for each grade of your opponent's Vanguard. So because of this, you can get some really good draw potential or some really good crit potential if you want to sit here and try to end the game. The only thing is that it does Soul Blast 5. So because of that, that is a very high cost, but there are ways to get around that. We'll talk about those in a second. The next grade 3 is Battle Deity of the Night, Artemis. Its effect reads, continuous on Van. All of your units with a godly equip gauge cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects. They get plus 5k and the trigger effects that were given to this unit. And then auto on rear, when placed, put a card from your soul face down as a godly equip for this unit. So with the Artemis, you can see something that's decently new as far as the game, and that is this godly equip gauge. So obviously, as it says in its auto, the godly equip gauge is pulling a card from soul and putting it face down under this unit. So because of that, it does require soul to get godly equip gauge off, but if you do have godly equip gauge, it has some decent effects, at least with this Artemis. Next card is Eternal Goddess Iwanagahime, and its effect reads, act on Van or rear, cost Soul Blast 3 and draw a card, and put a card from your hand into your soul, and increase this unit's power by 2 times of the shield of the card you put into your soul until end of turn. So this is the first card that you can see some Soul Blast or some Soul Charge, getting some extra cards into Soul, which obviously with Himiko's effect, you kind of need some Soul Charge in this deck, as well as gaining the power by 2 times the shield of the card you put into Soul is not bad. If you sit here and put a trigger unit, then obviously that shield is doubled and put into the power until end of turn, which can be some pretty good power for some pretty good pokes. Next is Goddess of Milky Way, Pleione, and this is the grade 3 that does not have a force marker. But its effect reads, auto on Van or rear, when placed, look at 3 cards from the top of your deck, put a card from among them into soul, and put 2 cards from among them on the top of your deck in any order. So again, this is another soul charge card, being able to sit here and put a card into soul. It's just something good to have, again, with a lot of soul blasts. Next, let's talk about some of the grade 2s. We have Battle Maiden Saho Hime. Its effect reads, auto on rear, when placed, cost Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 2, draw 2 cards and put 1 card from your hand into your soul, then increase this unit's power by the shield of the unit put into the soul until end of turn. So yet again, we see something that has a unit gain power by the shield of a card that was used to soul charge. So soul charging is yet again something that is used very heavy in this, but again, you can get some really good pokes if you play this well. Next we have Battle Maiden Shita Teruhime, and its effect reads, act on Van or rear, cost Counterblast 1, until end of turn, reduce the next time you Soul Blast by 2, and one of your other units gets plus 3k. So this is a really good card, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. So with Himiko, you have to Soul Blast 5, but with Shitateru Hime, you do have the ability to counterblast and reduce the Soul Blast by 2. So you really only have to Soul Blast 3. So that's really good to have, especially in a deck that has a very big soul cost, at least from the cards that we've seen so far. Next, we have Twilight Hunter Artemis. Its effect reads, auto on rear, when this unit attacks, you may put a card from your soul face down as a godly equip gauge for this unit. and continuous on rear, this unit gets plus 10k for each godly gauge equipped to this unit. So here again we see the godly equip gauge. It does seem to be in the Artemis cards only, but it's still an interesting mechanic. With Twilight Hunter you get 10k, which again is some pretty decent power, as well as going off of the grade 3 Artemis you can still get some effects based upon that godly equip gauge. So because of that, this is another card that has that mechanic, which isn't too shabby. Next, we have Strongbow of Story Knight Ulysses. Its effect reads, auto on rear, at the end of the battle that it attacked a Vanguard, cost, put this unit into soul, draw a card, and soul charge 1. So this is a really good card. It soul charges itself, and then it soul charges 1 with a draw. So this just gains back a bunch of resources that could be used for a lot of other cards. So because of that, this is definitely a card that just helps you get back on track. If you use an effect that uses a lot of soul or something of the like, then this gets you those resources back to keep going. Now on to the grade 1s. First grade 1 is Bowstring of Heaven and Earth Artemis. Yet another Artemis card. And its effect reads, auto on rear, when it attacks or boosts, you may put a card from your soul face down as a godly equip gauge for this unit. And its second effect, auto on rear, cost, counterblast 1 and discard 1 godly gauge equipped. Choose one of your opponent's rear guards in the same column as this unit and retire it. This is the third card of the set and the last card of the set that uses the godly equip gauge, but this one uses it a little bit more offensively. Instead of gaining some continuous effects, it is something to retire a rear guard in the same column as this unit. So because of that, it uses it in a little bit more aggressive sense, but you might want to keep the godly equip gauge on it to gain some of the effects from the grade 3 Artemis. Next up, we have Battle Maiden Mihikari Hime. And its effect reads, auto on rear, when place, reduce the next time you Soul Blast by 3 until end of turn. So this is a really good card in the aspect that it helps with the Soul Blasts. It reduced the Soul Blast by 3, which again, with Himiko, reducing that Soul Blast by 3 is definitely something that you need. So this is a really good card to help with the cost for a lot of effects. So this is going to be a really good card in the deck. And for the last grade 1, we have Swift Runner of Clear Skies Achilles. Its effect reads, act on rear, cost, put this card into your soul, and 3 of your units get plus 3k until end of turn. This is just a really good one in that it soul charges itself, which should go without saying at this point. This deck is very soul heavy, so having that is something that you really need. But obviously with the soul, many of the effects, again, require soul blasts and gain soul charge. But a lot of these only really help the player in that it has power boosts or hand advantage. Nothing that really disrupts the opponent directly except for the grade 1 Artemis. The benefit of many cards work very well, and this deck is very jack of all trades with its effects, but there's a lot of synergy with it, being able to soul charge, put units into soul, and reducing soul blasts, while some of the other cards utilize a lot of that soul potential, either with the godly equip gauge, which is unique to the V series of Genesis, or being able to just soul blast for some of the effects. This deck is something that works very well with each other, in my opinion. And for the last deck of Answer of Truth is Gear Chronicle, the second Force deck of Answer of Truth. So let's talk about some of those. Gear Chronicle is an interesting deck in the aspect that it has grade 4s in the main deck. So the only 2 grade 4s that are in Answer of Truth are Interdimensional Dragon, Mystery Flare Dragon. Its effect reads, auto on Van, when placed, activate all of the effects below according to the sum of the grades of the face-up cards in your bind zone. If you have 3 or more, this unit gets drive +1 until end of turn. If you have 7 or more, this unit gets crit +1 until end of turn. If you have 13 or more, choose 6 units and they get plus 10k until end of turn. And if you have 19 or more, at the end of this turn, cost, discard all the cards from your hand and you get an additional turn. You cannot ride during that turn. So this is something that we're going to see a lot in the deck, a bind-heavy focus. So because of utilizing a bunch of binding in the deck, Mystery Flare Dragon gains effects based on how much you've binded. So obviously, it goes without saying, the drive +1 is pretty good. The crit +1 is pretty good. Choosing the 6 units to get 10k, that's essentially all your units because it's not an Axel clan. So all of your units getting a 10k boost is something that really helps for pushing towards the end game. And then the final one, gaining an additional turn, that's always a plus in any card game. Just being able to go and take an extra turn without your opponent really recovering. So you being able to stand all of your units again and start poking for damage again and again. So because of that, Mystery Flare Dragon is definitely a really good card. For the second grade 4 that we have Interdimensional Dragon, Idealized Dragon. Its effect reads, auto on Van, when placed, activate all of the effects below according to the sum of the grades of the face-up cards in your bind zone. If you have 1 or more, your opponent chooses one of their rear guards and puts it on the bottom of the deck. If you have 5 or more, call the top 2 cards of your deck to rear guard circles. And if you have 11 or more, call 2 cards in your drop zone to rear guard circles, and 3 of your rear guards get plus 5k until end of turn. So, yet again, you see the bonusing based off of how many cards you have binded. This one has some interesting effects in that it can essentially retire a rear guard from the opponent, but putting it on the bottom of the deck. So decks that are very drop zone heavy, drop zone reliant, won't really get any effects off of that. And then just being able to immediately call cards from your deck or drop zone, respectively, and being able to just call them. That's something that helps with the aggressive strategy. So I think those are some really good effects. Now on to the grade 3s, and the main grade 3 that helps all of the grade 4s run together. Let's talk about Interdimensional Dragon Knight, Lost Legend. Its effect reads, act on Vanguard, cost, discard cards with their sum of their grades being 3 or greater from your hand. Search your deck for a grade 4 card, write it as stand, shuffle your deck, and at the end of the turn, retire that unit and write a grade 3 from your soul as rest. And its second effect reads, auto, when rode upon, cost, counterblast 2, and draw a card. So this one, being able to get your grade 4 cards from deck and writing them onto this unit, this helps with that aggressive strategy. Being able to play a bunch of cards and bind a bunch of cards and then get your grade 4s, it just works really well. And then drawing a card always helps. Next we have a Screwed Dragon. Its effect reads, auto on Van or rear, when it attacks a Vanguard, cost counterblast 1, and bind one of your rear guards. Choose one of your opponent's rear guards with a grade less than that card and put it on the bottom of the deck. If it was put on the bottom of the deck, you draw a card. So yet again, we see an effect that sits here and retires a rear guard to the bottom of the deck. Retire is probably not the right word, but it's a little bit easier to say. So that one helps just clear the field from your opponent's side, and then drawing a card, that always helps. But it does help get a card binded to help with the effects of some of the grade 4s, and a lot of the cards you're going to see have a lot of effects that bind to assist with those grade 4s. The last grade 3 that we have is Steam Expert Xerix, and this is the grade 3 that does not have a force marker. But his effect reads, auto on Van, when placed, this card gets plus 10k until end of turn. And its second effect, auto on rear, when your Vanguard is placed, one of your Vanguards in this unit gets plus 5k until end of turn. So, I mean, it's very standard. If it's the Vanguard and is placed, it gets 10k. If you place a Vanguard while it's on the rear, it gets 5k, and the Vanguard gets 5k. Now let's talk about some of the grade 2s. First grade 2 is Lost Break Dragon. Its effect reads, auto on Van or rear, when placed, cost, bind a card from your hand, draw a card. And its second effect, continuous, rear, during your turn, if you have a face-up card in your bind zone, this card gets plus 3k. Yet again, we're seeing a bunch of bind-heavy focus in effects. Next, we have Steam Mechanic Nabu. Its effect, auto on rear, when it attacks a Vanguard, cost, bind a card from your drop zone, and your opponent cannot call grade 1 or greater cards from his or her hand until end of that battle. At the end of that battle, put this card into your soul and draw a card. Nabu's pretty good in that it helps bind a card from your drop zone, so Gear Chronicle doesn't have any sort of drop zone focus, so being able to just bind straight from the drop zone, utilizing those cards that are in there, that works pretty well. And then, putting itself into Soul Blast always help. Next, we have Steam Hunter Lippet. Its effect, auto on rear. When placed from hand, cost, bind a card from your drop zone, and this unit gets plus 3k until end of turn. It binds a card. It helps. Then we have Steam Fighter Annie. Act, rear. Once per turn, cost Counterblast 1, and bind a card from your hand. Choose one of your opponent's rear guards in the front row and put it on the bottom of the deck. Call a Steam Expert Xerix from your drop zone to rear. If you have Steam Fighter Memene on rear, you may ride it instead of calling it. So this being able to bind a card, obviously again, binding helps in this deck, but then you are also able to call Steam Expert Xerix from drop zone to rear. The only thing is that Xerix is the grade 3 without a force marker, so it doesn't have much to assist it except for Xerix's auto, which helps it get power. So let's talk about Steam Fighter Memene, which is in the effect of Annie. Steam Fighter Memene is a grade 1, and its effect reads, auto on rear, once per turn, when a Vanguard is placed, draw a card and discard a card from your hand. If you discarded a grade 3 or greater, 3 of your units gets plus 5k until end of turn. So this one helps with Vanguard placement, just getting some good power to multiple units. It's just a pretty good card. Then we have Steam Scara Kalane. Its effect, auto on rear, when it boosts, cost Soul Blast 1 until the end of that battle. Your opponent cannot intercept and can only call up to 3 Guardians. At the end of that battle, bind this unit. So being able to help make your opponent not intercept and can only call up to 3 Guardians. So if you do a couple different pokes, then that's going to sit here and help. And then binding the unit at the end of the battle. Obviously, in case you couldn't notice, binding really helps with this deck. Lastly, we have Wedge Move Dragon. Its effect reads, auto on Van. When its attack hits, cost, bind a card from your hand and draw a card. And continuous in the hand, when this card would be discarded, it may be discarded as a grade 3. So Wedge Move Dragon helps with binding, obviously, but it also helps with being discarded as a grade 3. So for Lost Legend, its effect requiring you to discard cards whose grade equal 3 to ride the grade 4, this can be just a solo card to help with that. So that's a really good one. So with Gear Chronicle, it's a pretty interesting deck. There's a very big bind-heavy focus, and it relies on this mechanic very heavily, as binding is the main way to get off any of the grade 4's effects, and it won't work very well unless you have the binding. One interesting thing is that Xerix's 5k skill doesn't work with Lost Legends end of the turn skill, which allows you to rewrite a grade 3 after the end of the battle. After the end of the turn, excuse me. So that 5k is wasted. However, Lost Legends' effect to ride a grade 3 does help with Xerix if Xerix is on the rear circle. So that's something that might be considered, but again, Xerix doesn't have a force marker, so I don't know how much you want to run Xerix. So there we have it. We have Great Nature, an Axel clan with interesting yet fun mechanics that are very cost-heavy. Genesis, a force clan with a jack-of-all-trades effect style, but have a strange synergy about them. And Gear Chronicle, a force clan that uses the hand in many effects into many grand effects, especially the quote-unquote striding in the main deck. So, what kind of decks are you going to be playing in Answer of Truth? Let me know, and until next time, I will see you all next turn.